Another edition of 100% Canucks, something a little different. Take a little pressure off wondering and worrying what's going on with the power play or who's going to get traded next. We're going to spend some time with one of the names synonymous with this franchise, Landon, early on. Man who was drafted second overall, the first pick of the Canucks in their first amateur draft, Dale Tallon. And I got to know, I've known Dale for years and years and years, and Dale's one of the great storytellers. But I remember as a kid, all the pressure that was on Dale Tallon to come into Vancouver, knowing full well that Gilbert Perreault was the guy in Buffalo. And these guys were going to be compared for a long period of time of who's better, Perreault or Tallon. And I think Dale would probably admit at some point that Perreault was a little better than Tallon.
Yeah, I think you would. And it's crazy how, because you were born, what your parents decided to have a kid at that time, and you happen to be a very good hockey player, all of a sudden you're going to get linked next to someone like Perreault. And, like, Dale had a really good career. He made a couple all-star games. Like, he had a really good career, but because it was linked to that, it, like you said, there was talk that way. But you're right in, I didn't, obviously wasn't alive when he was playing, but he's touched basically every part of hockey that you could. Like, he's held a job on the media side, in management, playing. He's done all that. I was at the Memorial Cup in Kamloops a couple of years ago, and I had asked a producer at TSN, can I come and just kind of shadow everyone? Obviously, I was interested in media, and he's like, yeah, of course you can come up and come around. So I'm walking around with him. Before I knew it, I ended up at a table at the rink with just filled with scouts. And Dale happened to be kind of holding court. And that was the first time I'd ever been around him. And it felt like I was like a 10-year-old back in the dressing room with my dad, where I knew, I'm like, I don't say a word, just listen and you'll have a lot of laughter. Like, it was the best. It was so fun to get to hear some of those stories, and I'm looking forward to chatting with him again today.
Well, we're going to deal mostly with his playing career, and we could talk about this after, but Dale Tallon deserves credit to being one of the great talent evaluators in the game in the last 25 years. And we'll talk about it after we talk to Dale, but his impact on the game has been pretty successful for a couple of franchises, that is for sure. So it's Dale Tallon, the first pick of the Vancouver Canucks in 1970, on this edition of 100% Canucks.
I won't keep you long. Darren Millard with a tip for everyone who loves great hockey podcasts like this one. John Shannon and I host the OG of 100% Hockey, coming your way multiple times a week. The guest list is the best you will find. Multiple shows a week ensures you won't miss out on any news, and we dig even deeper into the biggest stories around the NHL. Most of our guests are also friends, so I promise there'll be more conversation beyond the X's and the O's. John really does get bored with that after a while. So join us for 100% Hockey. The name says it all. Subscribe now while you enjoy thinking about it, and enjoy.
Welcome back to 100% Canucks, joined by the man who was drafted first by this hockey club in the summer of 1970, Dale Tallon. Okay, Dale, what do you remember about the draft?
Well, not very much, actually, because we weren't involved. I found out, I was in a phone booth on Highway 400. I was working at the Orr Walton Sports Camp, and I was driving to Toronto for some reason or whatever, and I got a call to call a certain number, and I called it, and my agent said, "You just got drafted by Vancouver," and I was quite elated about it. I was shocked. I thought I was going to go third or fourth or fifth. I didn't think I'd go second. And because I thought that once Vancouver lost the whatever it was, roulette wheel, that they would take a Western guy. And I thought Reggie Leach was going to be the guy. Then I would go to Boston. Boston had the third pick. And I had discussions with them already, and so I thought I was going to go there and bring my golf clubs to Oklahoma City.
Well,
But
that would have been that would have made sense if you're working with Mike Walton and Bobby Orr
yeah,
to be a Boston Bruin, wouldn't it?
yeah, it was, so when Vancouver, I was elated about that as well. I'd just won the Canadian Junior Golf Championship in Kelowna the summer before, and it was a good timing for me because it made me a little bit more money than I normally would have gotten if I hadn't won at Kelowna Country Club. So they were aware. I threatened not to go to camp and unless they raised the ante a little bit because it wasn't a lot of money, and I could have made that much money playing golf, I thought.
Hello, actually, that's just a detour a little bit. Could you have gone pro and played pro golf?
I don't know. The guys that I played with growing up had some success, and I mean, it's a full-time job. I never played full-time. I only played in the summer, but I never really dedicated a full year or 2 years to it. So you never know. But I'm glad I took the route I did. I used it basically. I was kind of BSing them that I would go play golf if they didn't up the ante, and the truth be known, I would have played for nothing, but I almost did.
See, this was the detour I was looking forward to, because the golf side, like I had heard that you were a really good golfer, but then you start looking into it. I'm like, okay, you're not just normal pretty good. So like, how did that start? Was it your dad, your mom? Who
Yeah,
got you
I was
into
lucky,
golf?
Landon. I grew up in Noranda, in the mine. Noranda Mines built a 9-hole golf course. Stanley Thompson designed it. It was a par 37. And my mother and father both started to play golf when they were 30. They met the head geologist at Noranda Mines. So he brought them along and taught them how to play golf. My dad was a good athlete. He was a good hockey player, and so when I was a kid, I tagged along with them. And then as a teenager, I spent most of my time in London, Ontario, and a great friend, Mel Casey, who was a golf pro at Fanshawe Lakes Golf Club in London. And I would take the train down every summer and played junior golf tournaments in Southern Ontario to hone my game because I was a big bomber and I could hit it all over the place, but I didn't know how to control it or how to play a tournament golf. So I spent most of my summers in the London, Oshawa, Toronto area, learning how to play tournament golf and smaller, narrower golf courses, and so that's how it all started. And I loved it as much as I loved hockey, but it just, in those days, nobody was making a big buck playing. And I couldn't do the opposite, play golf and then go to hockey.
No.
But I could do the play golf or play hockey and then go to golf as I've done. And so I'm glad I made that decision to go to hockey. And there weren't a lot of guys making a lot of money in 1970.
But to put it in perspective, Landon, the RCGA, the Royal Canadian Golf Association, had a contest, and it was called Beat the Champ. And you could choose whether you wanted to beat Jim Nelford or Dale Tallon with your net score, and I think you got a sleeve of golf balls. I think that's what you did.
You probably still have them.
I think they might be around here, and so I beat Dale Tallon in order to get my sleeve of golf balls.
A handicap. How many shots did you take?
He didn't want to bring up that part of the story.
I took 10. Yeah. I took 10, Dale.
Oh, that's okay.
I took 10, and
Dale had to start in the parking lot.
Right.
But so, and that was, to me, growing up as a BC kid, that Dale Tallon was the junior golf champion of the country, and then was going to play for the Canucks. That was a double whammy. That was fantastic. That was going to be something that we could watch. So, Dale, what was that first year like? I mean, you were around. There was a lot of veteran players on that team. When you remember back to guys like Orland Kurtenbach and your goaltenders, there must have been some pretty good stories.
They had 69 players under contract at Canucks when they started. From the old Western League, and so they had a lot of players. We trained in Calgary, and we had I think all 69 were there. So, and training camp was 6 weeks. I think we played 11 preseason games, and most of them against LA because they were stationed in Victoria.
Right.
So we stayed in Calgary and trained there in the corral, and it was a battle. It was a struggle, But as the team was getting selected, it started to get a little easier. But, Pat Quinn, Orland Kurtenbach, Gary Doak, Dennis Kearns, Andre Boudreau, they were all so good to me. There are other guys that were a little envious because of the contract and being the first, So I had to battle through a lot of that. I mean, I remember Pat Quinn; he was always in my face every practice. And when the team was selected, I said to Pat, I said, "You got something in for me, or what's the big deal? Every time I turn around, I got to battle through you to get to where I'm going." He said, "Well, I figured if they were watching you closely, they'd see me in the picture. They'd think I was doing okay." So that's how our relationship started. And I went to his house for Christmas every year, and they're just lovely people. Kurt is first class. I don't know how many meals I got there, and spent a lot of time with their family, and they couldn't have been nicer to me after training camp. The training camp was a struggle, but once the team was set and I made the team, and they took me under the wing and showed me the way, and that was great. And I still have fond memories of that, and I still have good friendships with Kurt. I talk to Kurt as much as I can, and I just love him and his family. And Pat was great to me, and the family still. I still talk to Kaylee once in a while, and
Right.
so the really fond memories of those people. And we had a pretty good team for an expansion team. I think at Christmas we were still in the playoff picture, even though we were in the East. And then Kurtenbach hurt his
knee in Toronto.
out. And Kurt blew his knee out, and then that was the end. I mean, they didn't know what to do, and so the bottom fell out, and as a result, we didn't have a good second half. But still, fond memories. It's still a great times, and Vancouver is such a beautiful city. It's a place to live. The only negative was the travel in those days. The travel. If you had to leave at 8 a.m. to get to Pittsburgh at midnight and play the next night and then go from there. And once we stayed on the road, we were on the road for 16, 18 days at a time. And that wore on the players, especially the veteran guys.
I was telling Landon about that first edition of the Canucks that, in fact, you did play in the Eastern Conference. You and Buffalo, and you joined. So anybody's bitching and complaining about the schedule this year about the Canucks have now finished all their travel to the Eastern time zone. You guys had it it felt like you had it every month.
Yeah, our closest trip was Oakland, 3 hours. And we didn't have the best travel arrangements. We did commercial most of the time. They get on a stretch DC-8 in Vancouver and go to Toronto, and then go from Toronto down to Pittsburgh, or, Toronto to St. Louis. Wherever we were going, we had to make a stop or two stops. And Kurt was a white knuckle traveler too. Kurtenbach, he hated flying, so I used to bug the crap out of him on the planes because I had endless energy at that age. I couldn't sit still, so my goal was to keep everybody awake and irritate the hell out of them. Jim Hargraves and I. Jim Hargraves, hard-boiled Hargy. He was a beauty.
Was that one of? I mean, I know it was your first year in the league, but was it also one of the most, like, as you look back, one of the most fun? Like, obviously, I was a young kid, but I got to see my dad on that Thrasher expansion team, and they were terrible, but you could see how much fun they had together.
Yeah, I mean, how couldn't you? We expectations were low. We tried our best. We were limited, but we every game we competed, and we had a lot of guys that were good competitors. John Shella, and we had Murray Hall, Teddy Taylor, guys that played together in the Vancouver Canucks in the Western League days. Right. And so Gary Doak and Quinn were partners, so that was practices were as tough as some of the games because they competed every day like it was a game, and so I learned a lot. We had Rosie Paymont, Schmatzy, we had a good group of guys, really good people. And we tried as hard as we could to be a really good team and play together and hang together. And we did hang around together. I mean, Andre Boudreau, the little general, he was quite the guy too.
Rozier Paymont, what led your team in scoring that year, 34 goals. I still remember the Sunday afternoon game. I think it was against Toronto, where you won at home for your first victory, which was something to behold. Now, Rozier used to own a hotel in Florida. Do you see Rozier?
Yeah, I saw Rosie last year. I think he sold it, but he's still not far. Doesn't live too far from me down here. He's in Lauderdale. Is still I'm in north a bit in Boca, but yeah, Rosie was just a great, tough as nails, and scored 34 goals as you said, and didn't take a back seat to anybody. You know, he was really a tough guy as well, and a good guy.
We always look back, and older guys like you and me say, "Wow, the game's so different." Honestly, how tough was hockey in 1970?
Well, I didn't know any different, you know, John. That's the way it was.
Right.
Junior hockey was tough. You emptied the benches. They changed. That was the best rule they changed in 1972. When we went into Philadelphia, you didn't know what was going to happen, you know. But when we played junior in Peterborough or the Marlies, I played 1 year in Oshawa, 2 years with the Marlies. If we went in, the Toronto Marlies went into Niagara Falls and went into St. Catharines or Hamilton or all these little bandboxes. There was a war every night, you know. So that's kind of what you knew and what you were a part of. And so it wasn't just that the guys were bigger and stronger, and probably, that was the only difference. But you battled through it all the way through. And junior A hockey in those days was tough, you know. I remember playing against London in the playoffs. You know, they had Sidler and Maloney, and they had a really good team. And we had Mike Murphy and Steve Shutt and Steve Vickers and Billy Harris. Right. And these were big. You know, when Durbano and Dubinsky in Montreal Forum, they sold that out every game we played there just to see those two guys fight. And we had a guy named Tommy Johnson. He was our middleweight champ. He fought Gary Connolly, who went to Michigan. And Gary and I grew up together in Noranda. So it was a battle royale every night, and empty the benches. It was a normal thing, and that was one of the best rules for me that they put into hockey: the 10-game suspension if you jumped the bench and went and drilled somebody. So
did you know
any different? You know?
Yeah. Well, junior, I would argue maybe junior hockey was even tougher than the NHL at that point.
Well,
because there were less restrictions, right?
Yeah, exactly. So
you also have a bunch of guys, because I always found that too, and I'm obviously years and years later, but at junior time, you have a bunch of guys that know that that's the end of the road for them too, and they're trying to have their stories in, and those are the 19, 20-year-olds that they know they're done. Those are the ones you had to be careful of.
No kidding, you know.
I couldn't
if you're
imagine
16
in your time.
And you're fighting a 20-year-old, you know, there's a big difference from those are 4 years. You're 16, I was 15 turning 16. I'm, fighting a guy 19, 20. That's pretty scary sometimes, you know. Some of the guys I know, a couple guys in Hamilton, they had to shave in between periods. You know, they were scary. That rink was the size of John's office there, you know. We played, it was about 150 feet long by about 65 feet wide.
No, the stories of the old Hamilton Gardens. That place was legendary. So, no, but I got to say, listen, Dale, I was just looking at your numbers your last year with the Marlies. You led the team in scoring. You had 39 goals in 54 games as a defenseman. You also had 128 penalty minutes. So was that were those defensive penalty minutes or?
I was a yapper. I liked the yap.
Oh, really?
I didn't like referees much. No, but that's the way it was. You know, you had to fight through it. And I didn't like it, but you had to do it. And if you didn't do it, your teammates would disown you. You know, nowadays, if you turn away from it, it's you're smart. You know, but it's a big difference. You know, a guy making $10 million, you're not going to fight a guy making $800,000. You're going to hurt yourself and ruin your career. So, but that's just the way it was. You know, you didn't think about it. It just happens, you know. And like I said, we had a big team, a tough team, and Toronto Marlboros were hated by every junior team in Ontario. And so we had to live with it. You know, I remember in St. Catharines and Niagara Falls one night, the power went out and they started singing "Oh Canada" and Jingle Bells and all that stuff. And we were all sitting on the edge of the boards with our sticks up thinking we were going to get, mugged. So there were a lot of fun days with those teams too, you know.
But it is interesting, you know, as you're kind of saying the differences, but even how you first started talking about your first training camp in Vancouver and how training camp was really hard. And once you got through that, you kind of earned their respect, and now you're on the team. It's a different thing, you know, compared to when you were a GM to now, where when you talk about a good veteran, it's the guy that goes out of his way to make sure the rookie feels comfortable on day one. Like you had to fight
Well,
through weeks or a
yeah.
month of that.
Right. It's a whole different thing, and I'm not saying it's better or worse, but it's just different. That's all. I mean, the game's different. I mean, no red line, and you see a difference. A lot of flips now, and not a lot of plays in the neutral zone, and no interference. The defense are getting hammered. The forecheck is really. There's never been. I don't think they call a charging penalty in the last 5 years. But it's a 100-foot charge. They're charging from the red line, and so you need 12 defensemen if you want to survive playing in the NHL to be successful and win. You need a lot of bodies because a lot of guys are getting hit from in the rush, and but it's different. That's all. You need more speed and you need more smarts.
So I was joking with you yesterday on the phone that that Hal Lako's not around. I don't expect you to talk about Hal Lako, but I would argue that the biggest change in the game might be coaching. Correct?
Well, it's almost like a cruise ship. You got as many coaches as you have players. It's just like and they got video and they got cameras on the bench, the iPads on the bench, and you can't make a move without somebody making a comment about it. So there's a lot of stress on younger players today because everything's wide open. Everybody's looking at you through the mirror, through the video, it's much different than when we had one coach.
But the tactics of the game, do you think the tactics of the game are the same?
No, they're different. There's more of a swarm. You'll notice that, that we were told, the more of a zone coverage, always add a D in front of the net. You don't see that very often anymore. Some power plays, you'll see 8 or 9, 10 guys behind the net or in the corner and no one in front of the net, so it's different. They play more of a swarm. They're always attacking. They're always after you, it's relentless pursuit is what it is now, and adding no red line. And so, guys get after it and get on it, and you can't slow anybody up. So whoever wins those puck battles down low is usually going to win the game. And that's what Florida's so good at it. The last 2 years, they were able to get on people and win a lot of those battles in the offensive zone, especially.
So I'm curious. I want to go back to the 3 years that you were in Vancouver. When in that first year, when did you ever doubt that you belonged in the NHL at any point in that first year?
Well,
or were you just too young?
Well, I lived in Toronto and watched the Leafs practice, and Jim Pappin became my dear friend and kind of mentored me and helped me along, and of course Bobby and Shaky at the Walton Sports Camp, so a lot of interesting people that I got to know before I even went. So you always have doubts because I was a centerman basically my whole life, and then my last year junior we had a bunch of injuries, so they Gus Bodner put me back on D, and I had the same number of points playing D as I did as a forward. So, and when I got drafted by Vancouver, they weren't sure. One head scout thought I was a center, another thought I was a defenseman. Other guy thought I was a winger. So there was some confusion in the whole organization as to where I should play, and it kind of that doubt crept into me because I was always a centerman, but I learned how to play D as well because my father taught me to play all the positions. And as training camp went on, I remember a game against Chicago, an exhibition game in Vancouver, that I figured it out that I was ready to play. I mean, I had a really good game on defense, and then they decided to let me play defense that rookie year.
Okay,
that was a game as an exhibition game in Chicago where I felt I belonged.
Yeah. So, had you been the general manager of the Vancouver Canucks in 1970, what position would you have played?
Well, that's a good question because I got a lot of offense from the back end, and I was a two-way defensive center. So I was more effective offensively as a defenseman because I rushed the puck and I could see the plays developing. And at center, I had more responsibilities defensively, and so I think I probably long term would have been better playing center the whole time.
Would have been longer. Your career would have been longer too, I would assume.
Well, you look at it today, there are no centermen, that's the one thing that's missing. But who knows, right? Other than injury, I had some good numbers and, go back on it. My biggest mistake is when I got at the first press conference, they asked me where I should play, and I said anywhere I can help the team, and they literally took me to heart. They played me everywhere.
You were too helpful.
Yeah, I should have shut up,
But you said like your dad made sure you knew how to play every position. Was that you spending time at each position as a little kid, or just always talking about it?
He coached my juvenile team. He owned the juvenile team in Noranda. And my dad played for Eddie Shore and told Eddie Shore to stick it. And he was a really good hockey man, and he was really good with underprivileged kids. And that's what I loved about my dad. He took care of the kids that needed help. And he would play I'd come off the ice, he'd push me back out there, like get out there. He would go play D or go play forward or go, so that was just every time I came off the ice, he'd say, go do this, go do that. So I was lucky in that regard that he was, and he knew the game inside out. He was one of the smartest hockey guys I'd ever been around, even though I look back on it today.
Do you think a bit of that's missing in the game today? There's so much emphasis on the skill now that directionally sometimes guys get lost. Like they don't understand the defensive side the same.
I think so. I think you're right. I think that there's too much, information going through their heads, especially younger, unless you're a real natural. But there is a lot of information, and it's confusing sometimes to some young players. It's hard for them to grasp. You have to understand how everyone learns. Some people need to be touched, and other people need to be told, and other people need to see it. So you've got to figure out what's the best way to get your message across to these players, and keep it as simple as you can. Because it's really not that complicated a game, if you're a left-handed centerman, your right winger should be your scorer, and your left winger should be your two-way checker. It's not that complicated when you really break it down. And like I remember Gordie Howe told me one time I was stick handling up the ice in an All-Star game, and he said, "Son, if I want the puck cleaned off, I'll clean it off myself. Just give it to me. If I'm open, just give it to me." And that type of simplicity is sometimes better than all this complicated, whatever they're calling expected goals for and expected goals against and all this other stuff, this rhetoric that I just don't like a lot.
Yeah, fair.
You're being very polite about that.
Well, I've changed. I'm 75 now. I'm more balanced in my attacks.
But at least you can still shoot your age, though, right?
Yeah, I'm shooting my age regularly. So, the equipment is fantastic, and I've never felt better physically. And, I just go out there and have fun now. I don't get upset as I used to.
Hey, how much? Just curious. There's two things that I want to talk about before we let you go. Is not necessarily to do with Vancouver, because actually those first 3 years were tough. Because you took a lot of criticism in Vancouver because you weren't Gilbert Perreault. Right?
Yeah. But I would have been criticizing myself too. Because Gilbert was the number one. If Vancouver wins the roulette wheel, they take him, and everybody's happy. But when I went out there, the expectations were high, and I had a good rookie year. And second year, I got off to a really good start, and then they started juggling things around with ownership and putting me in left wing and center or whatever it was. And when you have OCD and you're a perfectionist, that's a hard thing to deal with when you're 19, 20, 21. When you don't allow yourself to make a mistake, it's hard. It eats away at you. And then it's compounded with the media coverage and the whole deal. So there's a lot going on when you're in that age, and you don't want to disappoint anybody. So sometimes you try too hard, and you don't get anything accomplished. But
so how did you manage it?
Well, I managed it because I had Kurtenbach and Quinn, and I had those guys. I had their they treated me like a son. They were brothers, sons, whatever they were. They helped me get through it, and that was my mother and father, obviously. But I was an only child, so I kept things to myself pretty well a lot of the times. And wish I had spoken up more, but that's the way it goes. I was taught differently to keep your eyes open, your ears open, and your mouth shut. And that was my motto when I went scouting too. I told our scouting staff, this is what you do.
Yeah.
Shut up and watch.
The two questions I had, it was you became a really good television broadcaster. You created you had a cult in Chicago. They loved you in Chicago. You and Pat had a good thing going for a long period of time.
Right.
What was the key to that?
Well, John, I had broken my leg at the end, and it wasn't set properly. And so I was awaiting whether I was going to play again or not. I was, my leg was really bad. It was 10 degrees off, and it just was, I had a hard time. I wanted to keep playing, but I just couldn't. So telemedia, Mike Nickluck, remember Mike Nickluck left the booth to go coach the Leafs? So friends of mine, Paul Williams, that worked for telemedia, and said, we're looking for a player. I said, well, I'll do it, but there's a chance I might have to go back and play. So I did 40 games on radio in Toronto, and I hated it because in radio, you had to be so descriptive of location, and I never got in and out, I mean, Ron Hewitt was great, but I stumbled. I was not having fun with it. And then I decided I was going to retire. They asked me back. I go, wow, I can't believe they asked me back. I was brutal. Because I didn't know what I was doing. So then when I got an opportunity in Chicago Sports Vision was a cable outlet that had started to do the TV. I did one game in Minnesota, and I felt TV was a lot easier because you had guys like yourself in your ear saying, oh, I got this coming up, be ready, type of thing. And then you didn't have to describe in the left corner or right corner, or, to my right or you just let it go, right? So I found TV to be more comfortable, but I learned a lot from radio that I didn't do in TV, and I thought the TV was a lot easier than the radio part. And then we did a simulcast. Then they decided to do a simulcast.
Yeah. Well, that's because Mr. Wirtz wouldn't spend the money, so that's another story.
But Pat Foley was so good to work with. Pat worked by himself for so long, and I told him I had a great deal with him. I said, I don't get paid by the word. You go to it. And that's how we did it.
And the other thing is totally unrelated to that is you were, as a manager, as somebody with a team, you were always an advocate of video replay and video review. What do you feel about it today?
I was the first time I brought it up, all the coaches came to me and said, why don't you, we should have a coach's coach's challenge. So I said, okay, I'll bring it up. What do I care, right? So I go in one of the first GM meetings. So I bring this up, and they have a vote on it. It was a 30-1 against. I was the only guy for it. So I don't think this is going to work. So then about a year later, they have another meeting. And they said, well, why don't you bring it up again? I said, absolutely not. I'm not going there. I don't want anything to do with it, right? And so they eventually went ahead and did it. And I think it's a good thing. I mean, that's, you want to get it right, as long as it doesn't get too carried away.
Well, that's the key, right? Don't get too carried away.
The key was how long were the games going to be? Because the games were getting close to 3 hours there for a while.
Yeah. And that's not the recipe.
No, 2:30, 2:35. Look what baseball did. They turned the whole thing around. I went to a couple of Cubs games last summer, and I was thoroughly enjoyable because they had 15 seconds to pitch, and you're in the seventh inning already, and it's only 2 hours. So. I think that in that face-off thing, they dropped the puck in 25 seconds. I hope they stick to that because I like that as well. But, let's get the game moving and playing.
The one I'd love to see just out of the international side is they don't kick the centers out. You get your quick warning, but the centers stay in. It just, even that, it's like that's probably a good 5 minutes taken off.
In a game?
Seriously,
when you look at this, Landon, at most games average about 60 face-offs a game.
Yeah.
So times 30 seconds or whatever it is, it adds up,
Yeah.
And I'm all for, and the other thing I'd like to see is the hand pass. So if you can do it in the defensive zone, why can't you do it in the offensive zone? As long as you don't close your hand on it and throw it to somebody. But, I think it should be all over the ice myself. And anyway, that's another story.
I'd like to see more kicked in goals too. I would.
Yeah.
I would. More goals the merrier, right?
Yep.
Yeah, it depends on what side you're looking at it, right? It's against you,
Hey, listen, Dale, thank you for this. Appreciate you
Oh,
taking time to
my
sit and talk
pleasure.
with us.
Anytime for you, John.
You're a good man. Dale Tallon.
Thanks.
Landon, I'll
Landon,
be back after
appreciate
this.
it. Thank you. All the best.
Thank you.
All right, listen up. Today I want to talk about giving 110%. Giving 100% means giving everything you got. Giving 110% means giving 10% more than is humanly possible. If we're going to win as a team, we need 100% of you guys giving 110% 100% of the time. If only 50% of you guys give 110% and 50% of you guys give 100%, I guarantee you 100%, we'd only win 50% of our games. Suppose 75% of the 110% gave only 50%, and 50% of the 100% gave 25%, and 75% of the 110% were not feeling 100%, then we'd be in a heap of trouble. That's why we need 100% of you guys giving 110% 100% of the time. Okay. Let's go out and play some hockey.
You get a real sense, I think, that Dale Tallon has a good grasp on life, I think, where he's been through some ups and downs. There's no question as a player, lots of criticism. Some believe that he probably didn't reach his potential, but he was a really, really good hockey player in Vancouver and in Chicago, and he finished his career in Pittsburgh. But what I was alluding to at the top of the show, Landon, was, his evaluation as a personnel person in Chicago got them a lot of bodies. When you think of the impact he had on, in drafting Seabrook and Keith and Taves, Kane was you and I could have drafted Kane, but there's a ton of guys in that organization that were in that organization that went on to win 3 Stanley Cups or portions of 3 Stanley Cups because of Dale Tallon's eye for that. And then in Florida, he went there to be the manager, and he was the one who signed Sergei Bobrovsky to that contract that they got an elite goaltender. He drafted Sasha Barkov. He drafted Aaron Ekblad. And there are a few other players on that roster that, have Stanley Cups. So in many ways, while Dale's name isn't on the cup for the Chicago Blackhawks nor the Florida Panthers, his influence can certainly be seen in 5 Stanley Cups in the last 16 years.
Yeah, is his name not on the cup for the 2010 one? I think it might be. But regardless,
we'll have our crack research staff.
Yes,
look at that.
We only have the best. But like, you're right. It's amazing the talent that he was able to find and put together and bring in the right pieces. It's even more impressive looking at the Florida one, like the pieces that he shipped out. Like, he traded McCabe, the captain, out. Like, he had to Chicago was already kind of stripped down, and he had to build that back up. Florida, he had to do both sides of it and make some really tough decisions with players that had been there for a long time, and obviously knows how to not only identify good players, but players that can play together and create a team. Just as simple as him talking about, it's not that hard. If you have a left-handed center, you need your goal scorers on the right wing and your two-way checking forwards on the left. Like, everything to him is just broken down very easily, and you don't have to overcomplicate it. But he built 2, you can call them dynasties. He was the foundation layers of that.
Did an amazing job, and you do wonder as a player, if, in fact, and by the way, Dale is on the 2010 Cup, so I do stand corrected and you win
And
another
look
one.
at this smile. I'm not going to beat you at trivia very often, but I got that one, and I'm very, very pleased with
Dale
myself.
had, I believe Dale had left the organization by the time the cup was won. So,
Yeah.
anyway, if they had made Dale a centerman full time, how different would his career have been? He took a ton of abuse as a defenseman in Vancouver because when you're an expansion team, you know how difficult it is to play.
You're not playing with the puck very much.
No, and and
that's
he loved,
going back for a lot, and
he loved to lug the puck up and down the ice. So I was curious, and again, because of where I grew up, and I was just a diehard Canucks fan in 1970. And Dale always strikes a chord with me, and I love talking about that team and all the players that he mentioned: the Kurtenbachs, Boudreau, Murray Hall, Ted Taylor. All those guys have a special place for me because they were the original expansion Vancouver Canucks of 1970. So that's everyone allowed me just to dig deep back into when I was a 16 or 14-year-old kid, loving the game of hockey and enjoying watching the Canucks all 8 times a year on television. I think that's all we got. We got them for 8 times a year. So it was
that's funny. That's
a little different.
Well, the game is, like in much of our conversation, the game has changed.
Well, and I tell you what, I had I loved it. It was one of the reasons it got me involved in this business and my love of radio.
Yeah.
Because we did listen to almost every game on the radio. And that's where Jim Robson created such a connection in Vancouver and in British Columbia with the fan base. It was just a tremendous time. They didn't win very often. They did not win very often.
But you listened.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Anyway, thanks for this, Landon.
Yep. Thanks again.
Thank you for listening or watching this edition of 100% Canucks.